Good Monday afternoon, guys. I'm Jerry Miller, and welcome to the I Love CVille Show, live in Charlottesville, Albemarle County, the Commonwealth, the country, and the world on the I Love CVille Network. Thank you kindly for joining us on a Monday. I am feeling like $1 million right now. This rain has cleared the pollen, the allergy cocktail, knock on wood, potentially behind us. I'm just eager to connect with you guys on this network about topics that matter to you, to Judah, to my family, to your family, and to us in this community we call Charlottesville, Albemarle County, and Central Virginia. Skooma Boutique Dispensary, proud partner of the show. Skooma Boutique Dispensary, 2 locations, Alleywood Avenue and the Downtown Mall in Charlottesville, next to Rapture Restaurant, with more locations to come in the very near future. Skooma Boutique Dispensary. Vanessa Parkhill, Queen of Earlysville, welcome to the program. A lot we're going to cover on today's show. 3 notches expanding in Scott's Addition. High school athletes are now earning branding and marketing dollars, taking advantage of their name, branding, their likeness to earn income. Your thoughts on that on today's edition of the I Love CVille Show. My thoughts on that as well. We'll highlight a business for sale in the Hive in McIntire Plaza, and we'll discuss, to lead the program, the vulnerable natures of our economies in Charlottesville and Central Virginia and across our country. We'll give some props to Castle Hill. If you can get that on screen, Judah. Castle Hill Cider's 231 Festival is Sunday, May 15th. Buy tickets now, castlehillcider.com/231. The Castle Hill Cider Festival benefits the Blue Ridge Area Food Bank, and last week, thanks to the donation of an anonymous donor, ticket prices dropped from $62 to $50. This festival is going to be freaking awesome. 231 Festival, Castle Hill Cidery, Sunday, May 15th. Tickets, castlehillcider.com/231. Judah Whitcower is our director. You got that 2-shot ready to rock? Let's get that 2-shot on screen. We talk about this often on the program. One of the topics Judah Whitcower reads about the most is topics that apply to your retirement, your finances, and where this economy is headed. Anyone who's watching the program today understands the markets have been bleeding, they've been hemorrhaging, they are red, 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 and red some more. In fact, it is May 9th, Judah, 2022. What is a common denominator for the stock market in all of 2022?
It's been terrible.
It's been terrible.
Abominable.
Like the snowman.
Yep.
Has it not been?
It's been pretty horrendous.
Look at your portfolio. I don't need to know specifics from yours. I'll cut to the chase. Mine down about 18.5%.
I think everybody's down. I think the last 2 years have been wiped away so far, if I'm not mistaken.
It is ugly. It reminds me of trying to go skiing on a mountain when the temperature's in the early 40s, the snows melt away, and you're just going down the slope with no lubricant and nothing to get you down there. Just a miserable experience. We've all, maybe not, I've certainly tried to do that. It ain't fun, it ain't pretty. So I'm going to ask everyone this question, and I'm going to do this with a realistic lens. Let's outline some KPIs of today's market. Okay, Judah?
All right.
Housing market is out of control.
Oh, yeah.
The first-time home buyer, the millennial buyer, has as low a chance of buying a house as any first-time home buyer ever has.
Yeah, no doubt.
That's a fact, right?
I mean, there's just no houses to buy.
There's no houses to buy.
And even if they could, they're not
going to afford it.
They're not going to beat the people that can get in there and get a money offer in.
Exactly, a cash offer. First-time home buyers are
SOL.
SOL. I was literally going to say that too. That's good chemistry right there. First-time home buyers are SOL. Interest rates are rising, making it even more difficult.
Yeah.
Gasoline. I was driving into work today. Gas hasn't dropped.
No, I just saw.
Gas went up.
I thought it did. I thought it was going down. It was under $4 for a little while,
It's
and
over
now
$4
it's.
now.
I think yesterday I passed one gas station and kept going because I saw like 4.35, and I stopped at the gas station that I usually go to, and it was only like 4.23.
Yeah,
But
I saw 4.29 this morning.
that's still like 25, 30 cents higher than it was the last time I put $10 in my tank.
Exactly what I saw. Gas has gone up this week.
Yeah.
Last week we were at $3.97, $3.99. If you're lucky, maybe with a Costco or Kroger card, you could have gotten into like the 380s.
Yeah.
Gas is $4.29 a gallon right now.
Yeah.
So let's outline some. Let's talk about the market. Let's talk about the economy. Let's talk about the position we're in. First-time home buyers can't buy a house. There's no inventory in the market. Interest rates are rising, making it even more difficult for the first-time home buyer to buy a house. Gas went up over the last 4 days. The Ukrainian-Russian war is no near an end.
No, and even worse than the war is all the tangential problems it causes, like Africa not getting enough grain because a third of the grain that the world consumes comes out of the Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah, commodities are skyrocketing because the opportunity to access or buy commodities is in a crappy situation.
Mm-hmm.
You limit supply and demand remains the same, prices are going to escalate. That's what's happening. Look at your menus at restaurants when you're going out to eat.
Plus, since we mentioned gas, if I'm not mistaken, I think diesel is rising. The price of diesel is rising even faster than our unleaded gas that we're putting in our cars, which means that getting all the goods around the country and other countries is even harder than it has been.
Both Judah and I are feeling good today. You're bringing it, baby.
Except for the economy.
So impossible to buy a house, especially if you're a millennial or younger. Millennials and youngers, let's cut to the chase, many strapped with student debt. Mm. Interest rates making it more difficult than ever. Gasoline prices going through the roof again. The commodities market is as expensive as it's ever been. The Russia-Ukrainian war is nowhere close to chilling or peacing or relaxing or taking it easy. Geopolitical tensions are as tense as any time that I can remember over the last 10 years. I'm at cocktail parties where people are like, is Russia going to turn their attention to the U.S.?
No.
Because the United States is funding Ukraine and offering financial and infrastructure support? Literally the topic of conversation. Markets are red. I'm looking at the portfolio right now. I got ETFs to play it safe associated with the S&P, with the Russell 1000, with the Russell 2000, S&P mid-cap. They're red.
I mean, if everything is red, then your ETFs are going to be red as well.
Help me find a silver lining. Help me find the silver lining as we characterize the vulnerable nature, the precarious position of a United States economy. Is the silver lining Charlottesville? Is the insulated nature of this community because of UVA enough to protect us from these macro KPIs? When does CVille, when does Main Street start to worry? When does Central Virginia start taking gut punch after gut punch?
I think a lot of us already are.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean...
Groceries, paying at the pump?
Yeah, groceries, paying at the pump. We've already talked about the issues with finding a house, and we didn't even mention, I mean, the ladies made some great points about about rent prices in
on this
the
morning's edition
previous
of
show.
Real Talk.
Yeah, and so I mean, yeah. What are you going to do when all that stuff hits? And it's
Danny O'Day watching
hitting
the
right
program.
now.
Go ahead. I didn't mean to
So
interrupt.
what are you going to do? If you've got you can't buy a house, you can't find a place to rent that's not exorbitantly expensive. You can't, you're running out of money for food and gas, and I mean, what are you going to do? I don't see how there's much of a silver lining to this dark cloud. And by the look of the market and the fact that Jerome Powell is afraid to do what he has to do, I don't see it. Nobody's ripping the Band-Aid off. They're just like, they're peeling away like, I feel like a tiny little, half a millimeter at a time, and it's not going to be enough or soon enough to do any good.
Dow is down 300 points.
Is it?
New low for the S&P and the Dow for 2022 today.
What's the Dow at now?
The Dow is down 1.5 points, 32,000 and change. S&P's down almost 2.5 points. And the Nasdaq is down 3 points and change, and the Russell 2000. Forget about the Russell 2000. Forget about it. Forget about it. I mean, blood on the board. Danny O'Day watching, absolutely right, Judah. If we think the cost of living is high right now, just wait until the fall. Mark McKinney says, and I love Mark McKinney of Crozet, stay the course. Don't make the irrational decisions. You selected these investments for a reason. There's an argument for increasing investment contributions. Fund prices are cheap and getting cheaper. Buying more shares at a discounted price.
No doubt. If anybody's still got money, now is the time to buy. Well, maybe wait for the market to go down a little bit further, but...
I'm not selling, but I'm not saying I'm necessarily buying either. If you're going to buy something, I say you put it into real estate. What's the only commodity? The only commodity, there's more than one. I mean, you could certainly characterize it for wheat. You can certainly characterize it for some of these grains that are at short supply now. A commodity that has upticked in value, that has persevered throughout this undoubted recession, real estate. I put the jack into bricks and mortar. I put the coin into bricks and mortar.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't...
Rent prices are going 13-14% year over year.
It's disgusting.
Home prices are appreciating. Your home.
I know that. And
You're Scrooge McDuck spitting gold coins out of your mouth.
Hardly. I mean, I don't think realty prices are going to go down from where they're at, but it's not going to keep appreciating forever.
No, and we talked about that on Real Talk today. The 13 to 14% appreciation all us homeowners had over the course of, what, less than a year? That's probably not likely to sustain, but the professionals clearly see it as a 3 to 5%, if not more. How do you characterize the vulnerability, A, of U.S., and B, of Central Virginia? The U.S. is as vulnerable as I've seen it since 08, 09, 010.
I mean, the world is vulnerable. Nobody's sitting this out. We're all, looking down the barrel of the same gun. Charlottesville may be somewhat cushioned from it, but I think that's mostly, we've been seeing a lot of people from out of town moving in. I've heard comments about how Charlottesville is becoming the home of retirees and UVA students. I think there are a lot of people around here that are already feeling it. Some of us may be better cushioned than others, but I think there are a lot of people that are probably feeling it, pretty badly, whether it's at the pump or, in the grocery store or both.
Neil Williamson liked the world is vulnerable line that you just dropped. Bob Yarborough watching the program. Summer is always way more expensive too. Boy, is there uncertainty now. Does it relax? Does it revert? Does it change course post midterms?
No.
Are we literally going to...
Midterms are not going to change anything here.
Impact on it either.
They are not going to do it because that's not where the problem lies.
Yeah.
I mean, there may be some issue in who's taking action in the government and what they're doing, but I think overall it may seem like a hurricane of what's the word I'm looking for? It may seem like a
collision?
Yeah, like a crazy confluence of events that's causing all this, but I think it's more likely that we've been heading into this for a long time, and we've been putting it off, and it's just been making the lead up to it worse. It's,
Here's the problem, though. If the Fed raises rates at the clip both of us think they need
it's going to cause a recession.
To push inflation down, it yields a recession, and it makes the likelihood of anybody buying a home for the first time in their life even more difficult.
Okay, but...
We know why. They raise rates. We're going to see mortgage financing vehicles also reflect the Fed's rate increases.
So you're basically saying that nothing is going to change for the people that already can't buy a house.
If the Fed raises rates, it literally is... Right now, let's put the millennial in perspective. Let's put most people in perspective. Most people are dying a death by 1,000 cuts. 1,000 cuts, gas. 1,000 cuts, groceries. 1,000 cuts, restaurant, go out to eat. 1,000 cuts, money doesn't have the same value. 1,000 cuts, 401k, stock portfolio, down 18, 20%. 1,000 cuts, landlord, jacking up their rent, 15% year over year. 1,000 cuts, try and get somebody, a subcontractor to work for you and see what their rates are. 1,000 cuts, HVA servicing your unit. 1,000 cuts, the plumber you need to help fix your stuff. 1,000 cuts, the doctor rates that have all gone up.
Yeah.
Everyone's dying a death by 1,000 cuts. The alternative is not the alternative, but what we think should happen, increasing the rates, would be death by 2,000 cuts. Death by 2,000 cuts. All those cuts that I just described, plus interest rates on credit cards higher. Credit card rates associated with prime. Trying to buy a freaking house, rates going up. How's the millennial going to be able to do that when interest rates are going to be 2-3x than what they are right now?
It doesn't matter. We've just said that
So
millennials
you basically
can't
say no to the
buy...
millennial?
No.
You basically say to the millennial and younger, the first-time home buyer, we're having a conversation for the sake of a talk show. Sometimes you got to bring a little energy for entertainment purposes. Please talk to us, shoot away, Karen.
I get it, but you were just saying that millennials can't...
Can you tell? I can tell.
You were just saying that millennials can't get into a house now anyways. So now you're saying that we can't do something that's going to prevent them from getting into a house? That doesn't make any sense. And the problem is, like, I don't know how many people out there read science fiction, and I don't know...
Alex does. Lee Elberson, who's watching, does.
I don't know if... I don't think this is a perfect metaphor, but... But the Foundation series by Asimov, I mean, the core concept was that there was somebody, the main character, well, I guess kind of the main character, foresaw a dark period in the future. And they realized that they could do something about it that would not make them popular, but it would shorten the dark period to come. And that's kind of the way I feel everything is going right now. There is, like, we need a recession. Not because anybody wants it, but because everything has been leading to it. Like our economy, nobody has done anything to stop the fact that we're heading towards a recession. They've just kept pushing it back and kicking the can for another day. And now, when Jay Powell is slowly edging up interest rates, and everyone's like, well, what are you going to do? If he puts them up too high, we're going to have a recession. Okay, well, then would you like this to continue the way it is for another 5 years, 10 years? Or do you want to rip the Band-Aid off and get it over with? Eventually, our economy needs to adjust. And I think that's going to require a recession.
Lee Elberson on LinkedIn, they want to force a recession, right? Asking a question, they want it. I think now's a good time to welcome from the green room. It's a little more sunny in the green room now without this. Let's bring in Alex Urpí. I put a little post-it note right there. I can't wait to see Alex Urpí here. Looks like he got a fresh haircut, Alex Urpí. He looks fantastic in the pastels.
Courtesy of my dad.
Xavier, you do a hell of a job with the haircut. Alex is looking as Antonio Banderas is Evo right now. All right, so a lot we're going to cover here. You just jump in. First, good afternoon.
Good afternoon,
We'd love
guys.
to have you here. Talk to us, baby. Talk to us.
That's an interesting question by Lee, because I think you could argue inflation historically at sooner or later causes a recession, even if you leave it alone. The question is, how bad is that? And the question is whether the Fed does enough to start a recession, but not enough to quell inflation, and then you're basically in stagflation territory, which you really don't want to be in. I think that's the number one. That's the bigger concern, I would say, because if you leave inflation alone for too long, you end up with a recession anyway. Because people stop. Eventually, people cannot afford to buy things anymore, so you've cut so much out of your budget that consumer confidence plummets and you get a recession.
I mean, the only reason we're not in stagflation now is because of the employment.
Pretty much.
The employment is the only reason that this climate is not described as stagflation, because employment, how do you characterize it?
Well, it's half of it, right? Stagflation is high unemployment, high inflation. We have one half of the equation, which is high inflation, but unemployment is low right now. Therefore, by definition, it's not stagflation.
Some would argue that unemployment is another figure that's skewed, because they're not taking into account the people that have completely left the job market.
You have given up altogether.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in other words, if you look at the most recent employment numbers, yes, they looked good on the surface of it in terms of unemployment, but the labor force participation rate dropped 0.2%. For labor force participation, that's a large number. I know it sounds small, 0.2 percentage points, but for labor force participation, that's significant. And what that means
That's
is
millions
that
of people.
there's less people seeking work. And so that can drop the unemployment rate, even though it's not a positive development. In other words, people giving up on seeking work isn't exactly a positive thing, yet it drops the unemployment rate. Furthermore, you still sit there and say, how can there be, there's all these open jobs, yet there are all these people seeking work. So there's some kind of disconnect, which is also unhealthy in a sense.
So look, I'll throw this to you. I love you guys. I love when Alex comes on the program. Lee, we're going to get to your comments on LinkedIn here. Mark, we're going to get to your comments. The feed is blowing up right here. This is something that everyone is mindful of. We are fortunate in so many ways to live in this area. Still, the Main Street chatter in this area is not so much this, but I'm starting to see the chatter shift. I talk to my friends from outside Central Virginia, however, family, friends, people on social, and this chatter is them and their real life and what they're living. So the question we start asking is, when does it proliferate or penetrate this community?
That's a tough question. I think the number one thing that a lot of times people don't understand about recessions is that they do not strike all places in the country equally. Even if you go back to the last, like I can find you, even in 2008, 2009, I can find you locations in the United States where home prices, rather than collapsing, went up. So recessions do not hit all parts of the country equally. It is possible that certain areas, because of other factors specific to them, may see either less depressed economic circumstances or some type of growth, ironically enough, even in the midst of what can be a nationwide recession. So the problem is, what we could be seeing is that there's enough wealth being, currently generated into Charlottesville that people aren't quite feeling the pinch yet in terms of, oh my goodness, my income is declining, I cannot find work, that kind of circumstance. They're obviously feeling it with inflation. With that chatter is certainly here in Charlottesville, and they're obviously feeling it in terms of, all right, I can be a little more choosy in what work right now and what jobs I seek. I mean, the small business owners will tell you the difficulty of finding people.
Oh yeah.
But for Charlottesville, that may not, for a while, even if the country itself goes into recession, it may take a while before you begin to see in Charlottesville, I can't find work, my wages have declined rather than just failed to keep up with inflation. So these things affect different areas of the country differently. And plus, I think there's also what they call the wealth effect, meaning when you see the value of your home increasing, this can lend you to have the impression, that things are going well, even if other economic circumstances, even if other economic data would suggest that things are not going as well. You feel a boost if you see your home, rise in value. Conversely, you can feel very negative if you see your 401k declining. So people are seeing, the question is, well, what's the overriding effect? Are people feeling better because their home is worth more, or are they feeling a little worse because their 401k looks like garbage right now?
I think there's also a little bit of the old cartoon coyote out over the edge of the cliff. I think a lot of people like watching mainstream. Yeah, a lot of people watching mainstream news are, they're not kind of getting the bigger picture. Like, we talk about a lot of different areas, and we see a lot of different things that are having an effect. And so I think for a lot of people, it's just this kind of unawareness. They're they're watching a news that's saying that everything is fine, and so they're actually like out off the edge of the cliff, but they just haven't looked down yet.
Well said. You're bringing it today. Both you guys are. This is from Lee Elberson. This is a great topic of conversation. Are you ready for this one?
All right,
Judah, why don't you start with this one? This is literally what you would say. A recession could be an economic equalizer for this country.
Yeah.
Who wants to touch? Judah, why don't you touch that one first? Lee Elberson, you're bringing it. I love it. Economic equalizer.
Okay, well, one of the reasons I definitely agree with him is because I think part of the reason comes from the stock market. I think a lot of rich people, and by that I mostly mean like hedge funds and stuff, I think because of all the money that's been pumped into the economy, they are so massively over leveraged that part of the problem is that the market isn't propped up by anything even closely looking like reality. I think it's propped up by a lot of leverage. There's way too much money in it, and it's built on. It's a house of cards. And we all know what happens to a house of cards. Eventually, a puff of wind comes into the room and knocks the whole thing down.
Elberson adds this, and then Urpí, you jump in here. We should have already felt these cuts, the 1,000 cuts we were talking about earlier, during the pandemic, but they delayed this by injecting $6 trillion into the economy.
Oh, probably. I mean, the challenge is, right, recession is not a good thing.
Yeah, I knew he was going to take that. Right? I knew you were going to take that.
It is a painful thing to experience, right? And it always hurts the poor more than the very wealthy, right? So in that sense, it is not a good thing. However, a recession is a natural part of the business cycle. If you attempt to evade it and put it off by pumping a bunch of money in the system, all you do is make the bubble bigger. Mm-hmm. So there is an argument to be had that as painful as recession is, the last thing you want to do if you have a balloon that is going to pop is and is losing air, is to try to pump a bunch more air into it, because if it pops, it's going to be a lot worse than if it fizzled out and then you put more air into it. So that's the only issue. We've seen this movie before, that if you try to pump money into the system to forestall recession, you may end up with a worse recession than you would have had to begin with. And that's, I think, the number one issue. Not the recession is good, but that recession is part of the business cycle. That's how it works. Inventory goes in there, inflation can come, you get high inventories, too much production, right? Then things take off. What's interesting here is that you wouldn't argue that we have too much production. It's not that we have an overwhelming number of goods here, but the challenge we're having is that there is just so much money chasing so few goods, which is the classic definition of inflation, is too much money chasing too few goods, and money has to come out of that system one way or the other. And it's either going to come out of this system because we took it out, or it's going to come out of the system because the system crashes and people stop spending.
You want to add to this?
No, I mean, that's basically what I was saying earlier, is that nobody wants a recession, but all the signs are pointing to the fact that our economy needs it. And
James Watson says, is Charlottesville and Albemarle County recession-proof?
No.
Oh, no. Again, there's different cushions it may have. In other words, you may be seeing negative growth nationwide, and it takes Charlottesville 6 more months before they hit negative growth. But I would be very surprised if, I'm not sure anywhere is completely recession.
I'll take it a step further. Will a recession make Charlottesville and Albemarle County wealthier and more homogeneous in its demographic than ever before? With this being the thinking, we already have the luxury, with the advent of technology, the ubiquitous nature of technology, with some fields, white-collar fields, of working remotely through an ISP. As it gets more expensive and as the dollar drops in value, which is literally happening now in every community, more expensive, dollar dropping in value, will people strategically move to places like Charlottesville at a greater clip to save a buck, to tighten the budget, and in the process, making the community more homogeneous and wealthier than it's ever been? It already started during the pandemic. We saw it during COVID. Interesting thing. My beautiful wife watching the program, I think you are watching the program, sweetheart, let me know if you are. Yesterday was Mother's Day. She said, I'd love to have brunch on the water. You know, scratch your head a little bit. You're like, we're in Central Virginia right here. I got to do something special. How the hell am I going to get brunch on the water?
Hold on while I fill up the tub.
Okay, so what we did was we went to the Boathouse Rockets Landing in Richmond. Anyone who's watching, you and your girlfriend would love this. It's about 50 minutes from here. It's gorgeous.
Was that overlook the James?
Overlooking the James River.
Oh, very nice.
The Boathouse Rockets Landing. I also would suggest the Lily Pad. It's a restaurant on a marina, a little bit further down toward Henrico. But the Boathouse and Rockets Landing. You and I, Jude as well, we study people. We watch human interaction, human behavior. And the folks that study human interaction and human behavior can utilize that as an advantage to some time. One of the things I was noticing in Richmond at this particular restaurant, and as we walked around Carytown, was how incredibly diverse the community was. You had folks from all racial backgrounds at Carytown and at the Boathouse at Rockets Landing. It was eclectic. It was diverse in its look and its feel. I heard different languages, different ways that folks were even speaking English. You know, it was a melting pot. It was exciting. It was great to be in Carytown and Richmond and Jackson Ward at Rockets Landing and walking around. You walk on the downtown mall in Charlottesville. You walk around Albemarle County. There is not that. I'm cutting to the chase. It is not that diverse. Okay, it is similar vernaculars, same way folks talking, folks looking a lot alike. I'm gonna say it again, I'll throw it to both you guys. Alex, why don't you start? A recession leading toward Charlottesville, Albemarle County becoming even wealthier and more homogenous than ever. Could we see that be a collateral damage of it, just like we saw it during the pandemic?
I'm not 100% sure on that. And the reason I say that the pandemic was rather unusual because you saw their white-collar jobs relatively unaffected. And the reason for that was because the pandemic wasn't a lack of a sudden decrease in demand for goods across the board. The pandemic was these jobs literally cannot go to work because they are in-person tasks, and the white-collar tasks can be done from home. If you get an actual recession which begins to take away some of those jobs, white-collar jobs are also affected by recession. So like people do get laid off. So I'm not sure that I'm not sure you would have a scenario whereby all these jobs that people would supposedly take and then move to Charlottesville, they may not exist if you have an actual recession. Because if demand for goods drops across the board and services drops across the board, you do lose some of those jobs. So it's a little different. I know tons of white-collar workers that basically they never stopped working throughout the entire pandemic, whereas the blue-collar people lost their jobs because no one went to restaurants, etc. A recession can hit you across the board. I mean, white-collar people will lose their jobs as well. So I'm not sure you'd have the same effect. Now, granted, you combine recession with increasing home prices, you drive people who cannot afford to live in Charlottesville further out to the periphery, then the interior of Charlottesville by definition becomes less diverse just by virtue of socioeconomic, right?
But I think that's been happening regardless of any,
Pandemic or recession.
yeah. Well, the pandemic, I think, was
Made it worse.
a big part of why it started escalating. But I think you're right. If a recession hits, I think everybody's going to be largely in the same boat, and I think we'll actually see less people moving into Charlottesville.
You think so?
I think so.
Really?
The difference we're looking at here is I think to Judith's point, in a recession, everyone's kind of in the same boat. Because demand goes down across the board, and people lose their jobs from the bottom all the way to the top. In the pandemic, I think with the lockdown and all that stuff showed us is that as much as we said we're all in this together, we kind of weren't. Like there were large swaths of people in white-collar jobs whose daily lives, in terms of the income they were able to bring in, were not detrimentally affected by the pandemic because of the jobs that they held. And blue-collar workers and small businesses were not...
Got shafted.
They got shafted.
Yeah.
So the difference is in a recession, everyone kind of gets shafted.
Yeah.
Alex Urpí bringing it, CEO of Emergent Financial Services, comments coming in fast and furious. Jamie Turner, JT, repping the PEP, Mayor of Gordonsville, says he laughed out loud when you said, Judah, hold up and let me fill up the tub. And he also says the boathouse is absolutely phenomenal. J-Dub's getting some props today in the program. King of Greenwood, Kevin Higgins, says this, what a balanced panel. And JW, literally calling you JW, is bringing it, saying what we all are already thinking and what we all already know is true. The Fed is about to Windex their mirrors soon. Alex is exactly right as well on pumping air into a flat tire. The question is, will the tire our country replaces it with end up being a square one?
I don't know. It's too early to say.
To be determined.
To be determined.
And we all know, he says, that what JW is saying has long been true for a long time. Fantasy land time is over for this country. Who wants to touch that? JW, you want to touch that?
Fantasyland is over for all the countries.
For the world.
I mean, if you think about it, China
is on lockdown. Literally.
Yeah, that's pretty horrible. But even worse than that is they're imploding. Evergrande is basically
real estate conglomerate
defaulting
Chinese leverage is
over leverage.
China's way.
They're defaulting on what, $300 billion in out of loans and whatever else they're pulling down. Russia is the same issue. They're because everybody's pulling out of Russia, they're looking at defaults, and it's all based around the economy being completely pumped. Like you said, we've just kept pumping air into this, into this thing that needs a recession. And as long as you keep denying it.
Central banks around the world for 2 decades have pumped money into the system. They have created so much money out of thin air that it's tough to know whether they can put this, can you put this rabbit back in the hat?
Right.
Kind of thing. And I'm not even convinced, to be honest, as much as the Fed is raising rates, I am not convinced that they're actually going to pop the inflation bubble.
Well, that's what, yeah.
I say there's no way.
Yeah.
There's no possible way raising it a quarter of a point here and a half a point there. It's just an impossibility.
Okay, that agreed. How do you thread this impossible? This seems like an impossible needle to thread. And the impossible needle to thread, in very simplistic terms, raise rates to check inflation but keep the economy from crashing. How the hell do you do that?
Oh, I'm not sure you do.
I'm not sure you can.
Yeah, there are times when, let's face it, there are times when the Federal Reserve can make mistakes which cannot be rectified. And the biggest example I would point to is 1929. The Federal Reserve basically contracted too much money. Milton Friedman made this point in The Great Economist in the 60s. You look back at the decade leading up to the Great Depression, the Federal Reserve contracted so much money, right? They kind of did the opposite of what they're doing now, but they contracted so much money, failed to realize what they had done, and inadvertently caused a major crash. But there's no going back. It's not like they can suddenly fix it. The Federal Reserve created $4 trillion out of thin air in 2008. They created another $4 trillion out of thin air in 2020. It's not as though they have a magic button that says, there's no X on the Xbox controller that lets you rewind and say, let me do that play again and change my mind here. It's already been done.
The Bulls point to, and I'll get back out of y'all's way, the Bulls point to household balance sheets being positive, and the Bulls point to pent-up demand that's been ready to be unleashed post-pandemic as 2 reasons we will not fall into recession. That's what the Bulls are pointing to. No recession because of household balance sheet positive and because of pent-up demand, bananas.
Oh, which I don't think those are bad arguments. So I'm not suggesting that there is with certainty going to be a recession. It's far too early to know that, and there's too many leading indicators that are going in opposite directions to be able to say it with any certainty. Because I think the one point which I think is correct there is no one would argue that demand is at peak. Usually with recessions, you hit peak demand and then it begins to decline again. Demand never came back to 2019 levels.
For sure.
Like the economy never came back in terms of GDP to 2019 levels. So to the extent that there are needs that have to be met, that people will need to purchase things, that's still there. That demand can still be there and push things forward. We haven't seen a massive decline in consumer confidence. I mean, the last GDP number was not good, but as my father pointed out, a lot of that was due to import-exports, because part of GDP is basically exports minus imports. That was negative last quarter, hence driving down. In other words, we bought more than we exported, which drives down GDP. Consumer spending actually wasn't too dramatically negative consumer spending was not bad last quarter. So we're not yet seeing anything that would indicate we're in the middle of recession or it's a foregone conclusion that we're going to enter one. We're just seeing signs that the possibility is there more so than we've seen in the past 5-6 years.
J-Dubs, comments coming in fast and furious. You want to take it first, or you want to go to comments?
Go to comments. I've got, I got a list of reasons why we're headed towards a recession. here.
Judah very much has got the bear. It's very much the
No.
bear here.
This is not me. This is someone who gave a long list of reasons why, mostly why the market is bleeding.
Rattle them off.
All right. Okay. Let's see. Nobody has the exact number, but the Fed printed from anywhere from 40 to 80% of all U.S. dollars in the last 2 years. I don't know if anybody knows what the reverse repo rate is. It's basically where, if I understand it correctly, hedge funds put money into the Fed and get treasury bonds.
Yeah, no, repo
And then-
is usually bank to bank.
Okay, maybe it's banks, but either way, it's reaching insane proportions. I think it's sitting at about $2 trillion daily.
Of reverse
That's
repo.
banks putting $2 trillion into and getting treasury bonds and then give them back the next day.
Okay, so keep rattling off the list there.
Okay.
So the Fed has no plan to slow inflation. They are aiming to contain it at best. Bank of America says they expect big pain after the S&P 500 drops under 4,000, and I think they're getting pretty close. Russian bond defaults contagion. China likely to default on bonds very soon. $300 billion from Evergrande. Ukraine and Russia produce 35% of the world's wheat. Diesel prices are rising faster than gas prices. Those docking containers that nobody can move are even more expensive to ship now. China lockdown seems to have no near-term end in sight. Elon Musk is using Tesla as collateral for his Twitter purchase. As Tesla goes down, he'll need to pad that money, which means he's probably going to end up selling Tesla shares. Not good. The Fed rate hike is smoke and mirrors since they increased the RRR lending rate by the same percentage as the rate hike, aka the U.S. is still generating debt, aka the reserve is printing, aka inflation is untamed still, and we're no better off than before the hike. The U.S. is an extremely apparent speculative bubble given that the DTCC owns all the underlying assets and derivatives create a surplus in share supply. Mortgage-backed securities are crashing and have been for a few months now. I don't know how true that is.
I'm not sure about that.
Banks are being raided for fraud investigations across the world. Recently, Morgan Stanley was caught stealing $200 billion from foreign countries. Imagine what they're doing in America if they're willing to do that on foreign soil.
Nicholas Urpí goes, Judah Wickower just really knows how to cheer us up. So heartwarming. Heartwarming. Right now, Nicholas Urpí. Judah plays the bear very well.
And one more.
Very much a bull. He plays the bear very well.
Well, the Bears are
we've
important.
got
For the show and for everything.
Pay increases are not keeping up with inflation by any means, and people are starting to finally pay attention to this about a year too late. And those aren't mine. I'm just reading off a list.
That's a Reddit. I saw that on Reddit.
Yeah.
You got that from Reddit?
Yeah, that was on Reddit.
We're reading the same stuff on Reddit.
I mean, I don't want all that to be true.
Oh,
I don't glorify the bear take on things, but that's just what I see happening, and I think that we've been putting it off for too long.
I'm not hating. I think the bear has a very important role, and it certainly is a critical role to a show like this for balance purposes, with me having such a bullish and positive outlook on everything. And that's why you and I, for 10 years this July, have made a pretty dynamite team in branding and advertising and content creation and everything else that we do here. What's your take on everything you say? And then we got a lot of stuff here.
No, it's. I'm going to be quick with it because these aren't shocking things that we are seeing. I mean, in 2019, there were people saying, and I was among them, saying it had been 10 years since the last recession. That already is a very long time. So the idea that
was that a full recession though? Because
the 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
2008, 2009 was a full recession.
It was a full-blown recession.
2008, 2009
now
was
you could argue we didn't deleverage to the extent we should have because so many people got bailed out.
I think that's what I was getting at, is that the bailouts prevented us from really hitting the bottom of that recession. And I think kicked the can towards today.
I think in some respects, yes. In others, in terms of people's balance sheets, they did end up deleveraging. Enough people foreclosed and so forth that you did have a deleveraging. The government did not deleverage, that's for sure. And there's arguments to be made whether or not that will eventually come home to roost, or how long you can actually indefinitely have the kind of debt on a government scale that we have. But no matter how you look at it, there are signs out there that we have not seen in a long time that do not bode well. The question is whether what's on the positive side of the ledger in terms of labor force leverage, so to speak, and pent-up demand are enough to overcome that. I'm not sure that they are, but I can't definitively say that they're not.
You want to add to
That's
that?
the challenge.
No, I think he
Let's go to the comments then. Jamie Turner, JT, repping the PEP. So what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? As people with the benefit of hindsight in 2008 crisis, what is some advice from an investment perspective on what to do in this environment? What do we do?
No, so what you need to do is become defensive. In other words, clearly what we're seeing is that what we kind of know intuitively. I mean, today is a bloodbath. You kind of know intuitively. In fact, we just looked at the three numbers that we have there. I know the audience can't see it, unfortunately.
Yeah, we have a
Dow minus 1.6.
Yeah.
S&P minus 2.5. Nasdaq Tech minus 3 point something. So in other words, we know intuitively small cap tech growth, these struggle the most in recessions, right? On the flip side, temporarily you're going to see pressure in bond prices because of the rate hikes. Long term, however, obviously, because of the way bonds work, your losses are somewhat mitigated by mathematics. In other words, those bonds have to eventually return to 100. They have to return to the face value at which they were issued. You also then have defensive stocks, things that you kind of know in recessions are not recession-proof per se, but don't struggle as much. And these are your boring names, your Coca-Colas, your Johnson & Johnsons, your Procter & Gamble's. They're not the exciting names that you would have seen, that we would have been talking. I mean, last year when we were sitting here in the same room talking about NVIDIA, Tesla, Plug Power.
NVIDIA's my number one holding.
Exactly.
I'm getting tricked in the cojones over here.
In other words, don't buy NVIDIA now.
Yeah.
In other words, and I'm not saying sell all your tech stocks and go to zero, but you adjust. In other words, if 2 years ago or a year ago you sat there and said, I want my stock portfolio to be 60% tech growth, small cap, and 40% large companies, stable companies, you might want to switch that now. You might want to go 60-40 the other way. Doesn't mean you completely sell out, because the last thing you do is panic. You never panic. Because when you sell out, I can guarantee you who's going to be, when you go out there and try to sell all your stocks right now, I can guarantee you some very wealthy Warren Buffett is on the other side of that trade.
Vultures.
There's a Warren Buffett, there's a really rich guy who's on the other side of that trade because he's sitting there and saying, these are great prices for me to buy.
Yeah, these folks are desperate.
Yeah, exactly. Don't be that, like, don't sell to Mr. Potter. You have to basically be calm, hold steady, right, and then make your adjustments, because you have to be a little more defensive than you would otherwise. Do not shoot for the moon and try to say, maybe I can time the bottom and really get in on these tech stocks when they're depressed prices, because you don't know where the bottom is. The bottom could be today, the bottom could be 6 months from now, the bottom could be 2 years from now. No, I do not have that information. All I can do is say, you need to just figure out what's the risk that makes sense for you. Make sure you have an emergency fund. That means having a little liquid cash in your savings account, to have a little bit in there, right? And then make your adjustments in your portfolio to be a little more defensive. Don't try to make 10% this year. Be content with not going down 10%.
Paul McCarter, the people that make money during this will zig while everyone else zags. Nicholas, your brother. To be fair, it wasn't a great recovery as well, 2008, 2009. The worst recovery from a recession in our history. Only the stock market had a great bull run, but growth wasn't anywhere near where it should have been.
That is
Nicholas
true.
Urpí, CMO, Emergent Financial Services, all around A+ guy, and I believe he's about 9 days from getting hitched.
So
Is it Saturday?
It's Saturdays.
Is it this Saturday?
Yeah, 6 days.
So
Wow.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Nicholas Urpí, you're
Congratulations,
about to get
Nick.
love cuffed in 5 days. You're getting love cuffed in 5 days. Congratulations, hombre. We love you, homie. Mark McKinney, Crozet, is the government driving full speed ahead towards a recession in order to save America from a recession and then spend more money? Look at spending in the 2008 recession, COVID economic impacts. It's all during an election year.
Yeah, I mean,
A
unfortunately,
little bit of conspiracy there.
yeah, the challenge is the government's response right now. The prevailing notion among both parties in government right now is you spend your way, like you increase the government's debt in recessions to combat this. That is the prevailing notion. It's been this way since the Great Depression. The
But current
Keynesian-
government doesn't have to deal with it. Next gen government has to deal with it.
Yeah, exactly.
kick
You
the
just
can
keep
down the
kicking
road.
the can down the road.
Yeah,
You keep
our
spending
kids.
until
You're Bambinos.
I know. So that's why I'm not betting on Social Security. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
I'm not going to assume that I'm getting that one. But point being is that the debt is so massive at this point, which I think is part of the issue that we're facing. I mean, will the Federal Reserve actually raise? Because we kind of know from experience how high you have to raise interest rates to kill inflation. And the reason we know is because that's what they did in 1980.
So that would technically be, what are we trending at inflation is like close to 9%?
Close to 8. The last time inflation was this high was
If not higher.
1980, 1981.
I think it probably is higher. I think inflation is probably is higher. So I think you're probably talking about you're going to have to raise rates, what, a couple points above that?
I mean,
Is that not what
they
you're saying?
went up to 15
Yeah.
Probably.
in that era to kill inflation. There is no way I'm willing to put my reputation on the line. There is no way the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates to 15%. And the reason why is not because of anything having to do
Wow,
with their
speaking-
official
That was
mandate.
with confidence right there.
You sit there and say it has, and it's not because of anything to do with their mandate. It's because they are not going to increase the debt, the interest rate on United States government debt to 15%. Because that 9% of our budget that is currently paying interest now balloons to 25% of the entire budget if you raise rates that high. They can simply not afford, from the government's debt perspective, to raise rates that high. So they're not going to do it. I don't know how high they will go, but they are not going to go 15. And that is my concern, and probably I think Xavier probably had to his concern as well.
Is the
that
closer watching?
what
Where's the
happens-
closer?
I'm not sure if he's watching it or if he's working. I'm not. He had a busy day today. So
Unlike his son Nicholas.
part of Nick's job is actually to watch.
This is Nick's job.
This is part of Nick's job.
I'm joking, Nick.
Keep on
I'm
top of these
joking.
things.
Nick does a great job. He's a fantastic
Yes, he
CEO.
does.
But
You're throwing zingers at my boy over there?
I'm giving him some grief.
It was a friendly zinger.
It was.
a
Yeah.
friendly
It
zinger.
was.
I love my boy Nicholas Urpí. Okay. 6 minutes left. 1:45 call on a Monday here. Judah, we see something very pretty outside over there? I see a little
Maybe.
distraction over there. Kevin Higgins has got
Beautiful
this.
day.
It's a beautiful day. It's a beautiful day outside. Blind stimulus money is not a designed bailout. That money was thrown out to quell temporary panic and was effective in a temporary numbers game. If the NASDAQ goes, everything will go. Tech has kept this market above water for most of the pandemic. The water line started at our chin, dropped to our neck with stimulus, that's now right below our nose.
well, from an S&P 500 perspective, he's absolutely right. The S&P 500 is dominated by Facebook, Netflix, Amazon, Google, now Alphabet.
Was it Fang?
Fang.
Well, Fang is now,
It has 2 A's.
is it now Mang? Because Facebook's metaverse.
Oh, Facebook's Meta now. Yeah,
It's now Mang.
Mang, I guess you could call it.
Yeah,
which
but
is
nobody
nice.
really thinks of Facebook as Meta.
We need a new acronym.
Nobody
they're
really
opening up
cares.
A brick and mortar storefront.
What?
They're opening up a brick and mortar storefront to sell the
What'd you
goggles.
buy?
The
The goggles.
Yeah, they're trying to make the goggles ubiquitous now.
The
And they're doing that
goggles?
with brick and mortar storefronts.
I don't even know what the goggles thing is.
The goggles is how you get in the metaverse.
Go watch Disney's
The
WALL-E.
Like
Go
Oculus.
watch Disney's WALL-E.
I've seen
And
WALL-E.
then come back to me.
He's not very bullish on the metaverse. But we digress. We digress. So a couple comments and we'll close on here. And you've touched on these already. Where's the bottom of the market? You've talked about how do you invest in a bad market. I think we're all in agreement that there's more pain for stocks and equities in the near future. We're all in agreement with that, right?
Probably.
So
Unfortunately.
this is a crazy situation. There's a saying that has really resonated with me, and that's the saying of once a man, twice a child. Once a woman, twice a child. So you come into this world, metaphor.
It's kind of like the 2 legs, the 4 legs, 2 legs, 3 legs.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Once a man, twice a child. You come in as a child, and you often leave, unfortunately, as
a child.
Unfortunately. As you you get what I'm saying.
Yes.
Okay. So over the weekend, I'm having a conversation with my dad. My dad's a CPA. My dad had my brother and I trading stocks and equities since we were 12 years old. Legitimately. No BS. Legitimately. Bonuses with allowance. Like, here are the indices on the newspaper. Give me 5 picks. Funded them himself. Took a commission for himself.
Good for him. Teach him the basics.
Literally, so he has a conversation. My dad's now 73. Dad grinded as a CPA for 45 years of his life. You sit behind a desk January 1 to April 16th and work 18 hours a day, every day, for 50 years.
Brutal.
It's going to effing crush your body and your health. And he's in bad health. Fortunately, his mind is still very sharp. Okay? So he's having a conversation with me over the weekend. He's like, what do you follow? We all read the same publications. We're all reading Barron's, Wall Street Journal. We're all reading the same stuff. He goes, what do you follow? What are you buying? What are you following? What are you buying? I said, Dad, Paul Tudor Jones said last week, this was as poor of an economic climate as ever for stocks and equities. He said, perhaps you shouldn't buy something now. I also said, Dad, you're 73, Mom's 72. Perhaps stocks and equities aren't the best play as we're heading to the back end of your life.
Principle.
And maybe you consider a more conservative approach to things, even a greater cash position. I said, Dad, have you considered
it's not cash
bonds?
income generating.
Yeah, income generating. You consider bonds. What are you buying? What are you buying? He's been doing this whole life. He also said this, he goes, 2022, we all saw this kind of coming here with the froth of 2020 and 2021. We all knew the markets were too rich, right? We all did. Yeah. We all knew there was too much cash.
And you had 83 PE ratios.
People were giving checks, $3,000, $6,000 checks for just having kids from the government, free money. And of course it's going to go in the stock market. So he's like, you know what? I'm not going to sell any stocks. He hasn't sold any of his stocks.
That's
he hasn't
right.
bought any of his stocks to this point. But he said, this week I'm going to start getting in the market again and scooping stuff up. I hope to God he didn't do it today, just because I love my father.
Well, if he's doing it now, at this precise minute.
I hope he didn't do it at 9:30 this morning.
Exactly, yeah. That's
9:30 this morning. Okay. So what do you say to somebody like that who's 73? What do you say to 2 groups that I'm most mindful of, concerned about, feel for? Retirees. And I'm also very concerned for and empathetic for millennials and younger. The retirees are getting death by 1,000 cuts. The millennials and younger are getting death by 2,000 cuts. Even worse than the retirees. Somebody that's like, what are you, Xer? You're a Gen Xer.
Oh, let me check. I've got a chart on
I think you're Xer.
on OBS.
We have the benefit of time. We have time on our sides here. But the millennials and younger and the retirees,
Yeah, I'm X.
You're X, are taking it in the 90 seconds each of you guys with a 145 call on the horizon, now a Monday 145. It's not going to be every Monday, fortunately, here. And I love having you here. It's great to see you. But what do you say to these folks, these 2 demos?
So the retiree needs to be conservative. You need to look at you don't look at what is the return I want. You look at what is the risk that I can afford to take. And that answers your question as to what you should be subsequently be investing in. In other words, you don't say, what do I think is going to go up? Let me go buy it. You sit there and say, what's the risk that I can afford to take in my portfolio at my age? And that determines what you buy, because that's going to be, I know the answer to that, obviously, it's going to be more defensive stocks, it's going to be bonds, it's going to be income generating things. I mean, you need to be generating some kind of income, but as if you're sitting in cash earning zero, it's getting wiped away by inflation. So you need to generate something, but you cannot be trying to take more risk because you think the market's slow. The millennial's different. My number one encouragement is you just, and I say this as a millennial, keep saving what you can, be as tight as you can. Don't be afraid. Here, you don't be afraid to buy as a millennial because your time horizon is much longer. Particularly if it's in a retirement account. I mean, if it's money you need, in other words, you should already have your emergency fund set up. So don't take your emergency fund and say, let me go buy the market because the market's low. But once you've gotten beyond that and you're looking at retirement funds, you're looking at additional saving that you're doing, do not be scared off by this. You buy it in the knowledge that in the long term, you have 40 years. I have 40 years for the market to go up. You can't panic and sell. The millennials in a different boat because the risk we should be taking by nature is higher. Whereas the risk that a 73-year-old should be taking by nature, you take out the entire market situation, you just say, Alex, how much risk should a 73-year-old be taking no matter the year, no matter the circumstance? And I say, not much.
Yeah.
Not much.
Dad.
You don't have time to have your portfolio get cut in half because you're making silly moves.
Especially bad health 73-year-old.
Exactly.
4 years removed from quadruple bypass 73-year-old.
Yeah. If he's going to need the money in any way, shape, or form.
Ma Dukes doesn't work, 72-year-old.
Yeah. You can't. I mean, it's one thing if you're someone who's so loaded with money that it's play money and you're set for life. Right, but if you actually using your retirement funds or will need your retirement funds at some point in the next 20 years, you need to be taking a very little risk at this point.
You were always on point. And I want to get in about 20 seconds today, Manana, his show with the closer, Xavier Urpí, airs Thursdays at 10:15 a.m. on the I Love CVille Network, and it's called Today y Mañana, and it's presented by the best of the best. Emergent Financial Services. Judah, before we get to Today Mañana promo, give me a take. Give me a take to close.
I'm going to say keep your family and friends close. If you don't have one, find a church or a temple or some group of people that will pull in the wagons, circle the wagons, and help each other out when stuff gets bad. I have no idea when or how bad, or if we're completely wrong and this is all going to blow over. But my advice is to find the people that are meaningful in your life and make sure that you all have each other's backs.
Amen.
Judah Whitcow, I'm going to go get this man a hug.
Because we may need each other
Judah
in the near
Whitcow,
future.
dang, dog.
Same here. I'm giving you a hug.
That was excellent. Dude, was the man not on point?
Yes. He narrowed it down. He went to actually the most important thing.
Oh my gosh. Can I give you the round of applause?
Thank you.
Stealing the show, Whitcow. Alex, Today Mañana, my friend.
Hey, man, as you know, we try to keep Today Mañana telling people about positive and wonderful things that are happening in Charlottesville. So we're going to have on another local small business, Martha Berlactas from Storied Goods. So a local business owner here in the Central Virginia area. So we're going to have her on. We're also going to have on Tom Chapman from the Albemarle CVille Historical Society.
Ooh.
So just talk about, as much as like these are tough times, this is still a beautiful place, and there's still wonderful people who are doing great things with their small businesses, with their nonprofits. So we'll just keep highlighting them, and then have our financial segments where Xavier and I give some tips and try to help as best we can to navigate financially speaking.
Lee says you're such an optimist.
I try to be. I think deep down I have a natural inclination to pessimism, so I try to overcome that by focusing and being grateful for what there is.
He also says, spoiler alert, the rich are going to get richer, so unfortunately CVille is going to get less diverse in a recession. That's what I think as well. Lee Elberson is A+ people. Everybody here loves Lee Elberson.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
John Blair, hello and welcome to the program. You killed it.
Oh, no,
Haircut looks good. The pastels look good on you. The beard is trim. You got some suntan over the weekend. Were you out in the sun?
In this time of year, yeah.
Me too. We can't help it.
I can't help it.
You can't help it.
It's the Latino in us.
Yeah, you and I were around a 60-watt light bulb, and we get suntan.
Exactly.
Yeah, my wife, she's around a 60-watt light bulb, and she gets burned.
It's burned. That's what happened.
Yeah. Judah, you killed it.
Judah was fantastic.
Freaking killed it today. Judah, Alex, Jerry, I Love CVille Show. We're back, baby. We're back. Thank you, Allergies, for being better. You guys have a good afternoon. Take care. It was excellent.
That was fantastic, guys.
Bravo. Gracias, amigo.
No, un placer, como siempre.
Judah, well done.